Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman. Guys, this is going to be an amazing episode. If you're a female and you want to become a CEO, this young lady is the one you want to talk to. She is a keynote speaker, top 10 podcast with over 1 million downloads. I've been binge watching it, so her numbers are probably going up. She's an author. She's been seen everywhere, including Huffington, ABC, all that good stuff. Sheena, welcome to the show. I can't wait to talk to you about what it means to be a lady boss.
Yeah, Richard, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here to just chat and, being able to help your audience realize their potential to move forward, especially women, because women are phenomenal. And, sometimes we just need a little push to take that first step.
So, what is your definition of resiliency?
Well, for me, resiliency, I think it's just moving forward regardless of the outcome, right? I mean, growing up, I used to think failure was a bad thing. I mean, I failed kindergarten for coloring outside the lines. So I always felt like a total failure every time I did something that went on to my adult life. And so I realized that failure is just feedback, right? If something doesn't work, you pick yourself back up again and try a different strategy, right? And you keep trying until you find the one that's right, right? Like Thomas Edison found 10,000 ways for a light bulb not to work. Imagine if he stopped at 100 times or 1,000 times or even 9,999, right? We wouldn't have any electricity, right? 9 out of 10 times they say like it will fail, whatever you're trying to do will fail, but that one time that will work will impact 90% of the world. And the light bulb is a great example of that. So really just pushing forward regardless of the circumstances, because life isn't linear. It's like a roller coaster. We go up, we go down, it's upside down. I mean, the pandemic has been a huge example of just life, just kind of like turning, like a huge pivot, right? So yeah, it's just learning that you have what it takes to keep moving forward. You keep moving until you get to whatever your end goal is.
I love it. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up? And how did you become the person that you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Cebu City, Philippines. Migrated to Canada when I was 7 with my family in 1989. So growing up in Canada, I never saw anybody on television that looked like me. So I was always ashamed of being Asian, right? Because I didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. Even in magazines and billboards, didn't really see anybody. The first person that had Asian descent in a TV show was Margaret Cho. She had All American Girls,
Yeah.
the first show. And then the first all Asian cast movie that I saw was The Joy Luck Club, right? Still one of my favorite movies till today. And then fast forward 25 years, you get, Fresh Off the Boat, Crazy Rich Asians. So for me, having representation is very important because we need to see people that kind of looks like us, that kind of, go a different route and realize what's possible, right? It opens possibilities. It helps people build confidence. Um, in my own life, I had a job that I worked for 12 years. I always felt like there was something more to life than sitting at a desk. I would just sit in my cubicle and I'd be like, there has to be something more to life than this. Like this just can't be it, right? And I'm not saying everyone hates their job. Of course, if you love your job, that's great. Good for you, right? You got to do something that you love. But if like this is not for you, it's eating you inside, you go to work Monday to Friday and you're like, how did I get here? Even though you know how you got there, but really you don't like, you're kind of like, what I just like, how did I get here? Right. I don't know if you ever had any of those moments. Yeah. Then my aunt passed away from a horrific accident about 10 years ago. And that was a wake up call to realize like life is short. I really got to go out there and just do my own thing. Was it easy? No, of course not, right? It didn't happen overnight. I was still a little bit afraid too, because we've been taught to always have stability, afraid and be afraid of the unknown, right? So for the longest time, I was always afraid something bad might happen. I was always thinking the worst of everything, and I had to build myself up, build my confidence. So about maybe a year after my aunt passed away, I decided, okay, I'm just gonna go do my own thing, right? Just decide to sell everything I own, quit my job and just kind of went for not having a real plan. Was my parents happy? Of course not. They were like, "You're already successful. Why would you do that?" Right? But I think it was just something I needed to do. Right? I was traveling, I was doing my own thing. I was trying to figure out who I was. And at the same time, I started my podcast, right, called The Tao of Self Confidence, where I interview Asian women about their journey to self confidence. And that was important because when I was trying to find resources that really catered to Asian women, like I couldn't find any, right? I was trying to find something. So a part of me was like, am I the only one feeling this way, or nobody just talks about it, right? And then representation was important because there's so many phenomenal Asian women out there doing amazing things, but never get to share their stories. So I started the podcast in September of 2015. And even though I had a podcast about confidence, like the least confident person was me, right? Because then I would be like, these women are like phenomenal. Why are they even like on my show? Like, I don't need, like, I would compare myself like crazy because, like, they're like here and I'm like here, you know? Um, and I always felt like I wasn't good enough to go out there and do my own thing, to create something. So like my own demons was just stopping me, right? And then also our upbringing, we're always told never to ask for help, never to promote
Yep.
yourself, never put shame in the family. So there's so many things that really stopped me from making moves, right? And it really wasn't until the pandemic where I met another lady that started our book series, and it's been a great ride from there. Just having a support system is really important. Being surrounded by women who really want to lift you up is really important. And also asking for help. Like, there's no shame in asking for help because, every single person is amazing in whatever they do. But we go so much further when we work together as a collective, as a community, right? We make moves, we break walls, we break bamboo ceilings because it's a group effort, right? And sometimes when you're doing things on your own, there's so many blind spots that you don't know, right? And that's why you need, a second pair of eyes, a third pair of eyes to see, hey, this is actually blocking you from making that move. So um,
Now, I
that's a
grew
little
up.
bit.
All right, guys, we got to go. I grew up around the Filipino culture. My mother was a nurse, and she always had Filipinos that she worked with. And I love your food. You guys make some of the most amazing food ever. But I also know you guys are, for your culture is you're very family orientated, and
Hmm.
you also have a tremendous work ethic. I
Hmm.
mean, because I remember when my mother was a nurse, she said all the white nurses would go home during the holidays, and the
Yeah.
Filipinos they would bring extra clothes to wear because they were going to pull double shifts. So
Hmm.
talk to us a little bit about the family culture, and then also the work ethic that you guys that comes from within.
Yeah, I mean, family wise, it's always about in Asian culture just having, save face, never tarnish the family name. And that can also hurt us, right? Because there's things that happen within our family that we're not allowed to say anything because we don't want to tarnish the family name. I'm not saying my family per se, but just like in
Mhm.
general, right? There's a lot of hidden skeletons in the closet and
Yeah.
things like that. Back then it's like women were second class to men, right? So back in the day, if a family had to choose between a son and a daughter to go to school, they would choose the son, right? Because the son is regarded more than the daughter, right? If you were married, you're basically divorcing your family and going into the new family, right? Then you get nothing out of your old family because you're married into a new family. So there's so many things that Asian women deal with in general. Like in China, if you're 25 and over and still single, you're literally called a leftover. you know, even though they're well educated, have a great job, have everything looks good on paper. If you're not married, it's like you're an outcast, right? And if you're like 25 and over, it's even you're like an old maid already. So it's really crazy that we go through so many things and just the constant like judgments and comparing, like, oh, my son is better than your son, oh, my kid graduated with honors and yours didn't, oh, my kid's wedding was better than yours. I mean, it gets pretty toxic at times, right? And if you're not doing the inner work on yourself, then it can get to you, right? Because it got to me before, but now it's like, it doesn't really bother me as much, right? Because I know that what they say is not my absolute truth, it's just whatever their perspective is, right? Of course, not everything is bad. Of course, like my family, we're all about, family first, right? If something happens, we're all there together. We're all celebrating through the good and bad times. And that's one thing I love about my family, just I never feel like I'm out of place. Even if I haven't seen them for 5 years, I come home and it's like, hey, welcome home, go get a plate, because Well, food is our love language, right? Like you mentioned, you've tasted so many different
Mhm.
delicious Filipino dishes. Food is also our love language. We sit around the table and talk and have a good time and have all kinds of food, and then that's our way of spending time, right? So those are some of the things that my family have has gone through. That we do, being able to do that, being able to spend time, being able to also realize like the importance of hard work, right? And I think sometimes hard work gets misunderstood, especially in our culture, because we've been told to work hard all our life, and we reap what we sow. Well, that doesn't really apply to Asians in America and Canada, to be honest, because we just work hard, but nobody notices us, so we don't get promoted in higher roles, right? In management and leadership roles. They're just like, well, they're quiet and hardworking, that's it, right? And also the model minority myth also kind of affects us because we're seen as a good model citizen who never complains. So if we even speak out or say our opinion, it's like, I thought you're Asian. I thought you're supposed to be quiet. I thought you're supposed to put your head down, right? Why are you talking? So that model minority myth really affects us. And because of that, Asian women in the US only represent 2.7% in management roles, right? You don't see any, you probably see like two or three that are in Fortune 500 companies out of, I don't know how many CEOs, but when it comes to CEO wise, the number is very small, right? Most of them are in like lower level tiers and not in higher level tiers. And we need to change that, right? And it starts with dismantling, the model minority myth, the negative stereotypes we go through, and then also the increase of stop Asian hate crimes, right, due to the pandemic. So yes, we can be hardworking, but sometimes being hardworking actually is a bad thing for us.
But now I also know, from your cultures and from the Asian cultures that um, I think you guys have a leg up on a lot of Americans because your families put a lot on education, and it seems like you guys, if you don't go to college or if you're not a doctor or a nurse, it's kind of like it doesn't seem right. But it seems
Yeah.
like they push you through education a lot more than the American public do. Is that something I'm just seeing it from the other side?
Yeah, I mean, of course, having perfect grades is important. Going to the best schools is important. It's also like a sign of status, saying like my kid's better than your kid. But even though we go to the best schools, like we're still invisible in this country, right? In Canada and the U.S., right? We're still seen as just the hardworking person, right? Or they think, well, they do good in school, so they don't need help from us, right? Just because we do good in school doesn't mean we don't need help, right? I mean, there's street smarts and book smarts, right? And if you're not street smart, like how are you going to be able to network with people or, get the promotion that you want or figure out, just life in general, right? So that's one thing I think that we need more doing. Like as Asians, we don't network as much. We don't want to, talk as much because we're just told to bow our heads down and just do the work. Um, but if we put ourselves out there, it's just so many things could happen, right? There's just so many opportunities out there. And I just want to encourage people, not just Asian people, just people who feel like they can't have a voice, go out there and just speak up, right? Have a voice. Be okay to share what you want, right? Be okay to go for that promotion. Be okay to reach out to that person, right? Because you never know what could happen.
Okay, now before I want to get on, because I want to get a little bit deeper into that. I want to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, I love my coffee. That's what I'm sipping on right now. I love my iced coffee. I don't like hot coffee, but I have a friend of ours. She has a coffee, Soldier Girl Coffee. She's actually a female veteran that struggles with PTSD and military sexual trauma, and she's not ashamed to put herself out there and let everybody know that she's a lady boss. So definitely check out if you love coffee, if you love supporting female veterans, definitely check out those coffee. And two of my friends that I hopefully you'll go on their show. One, her name is Annette Wittenberger. She's a retired lieutenant colonel in the military. She has a podcast called The Truths We Hide Behind. So definitely check out her podcast. And like I said, Sheena, I would love for you to go on her show. And then another young lady, her name is Tammy Moses. She has a podcast called The Hoarding Solution for people that are in the hoard. And they're both veterans, but they're also female CEOs. So I just wanted to shout them out today. I love my female veterans and female CEOs. So I just want to give them a big shout out. But now, when you were first starting your podcast, because those three people we talked about, they're all podcast hosts. I struggled with imposter syndrome. Who am I to have David Meltzer on? Who am I to have you on? Who am I to have big influencers on when I'm just this ninth grade dropout? So how did you overcome your imposter syndrome when you were first starting out?
I mean, that's why having support is so important, because they're the ones that encourage you to go out there and make it happen regardless of what you're going through. Of course, I had imposter syndrome. I was like, people are going to hate my voice. I don't know if what I'm talking about is going to make sense. It's brand when something's new, you don't know what's going to happen. And, you're always thinking the worst of everything. So because of that, I actually delayed my podcast a lot, but it wasn't until a friend who said, just put it out there. Even if it fails, it's not the end of the world. At least and you can just start something else, right? And so that's why I'm always telling people, like, support is so important, because like I mentioned, you have blind spots that other people can see and kind of work through it so that you can move forward, right? Sometimes they see what you don't see, right? And they need to tell you that so you can see, like, oh, okay, I can do this, versus like, well, I can't do this, my voice sucks, my podcast sucks, I'm a loser, blah blah blah, who am I to do this, things like that.
Okay, so how did you first start reaching out to people to come on your show? Because I see a lot of people that are in the podcast space. I coach people about podcasting. So how did you first start reaching out to people? Were you just like, screw it, let me just do it? Or did you have a little bit of trepidation?
Oh, of course, I always had like resistance of some sort, right? And so I started with my circle of influence, my group of friends. I was like, "Hey, can you be on the podcast?" Right? It started with that, and then a little bit, I built enough courage, right? Because I also had a wish list of who I wanted to speak to, right, or interview. So I just looked for their emails. I sent it over. Do all of them answer? Nope, of course not, right? But at least I'm putting it out there, and you'd be surprised who says yes, right? So being able to do that constantly, it's helped me overcome that, because I was like, well, I've been able to interview over 800 women. So being able to reach out isn't a huge problem for me if I need guests. And then slowly, you get referrals from other women. You also get people coming to you asking if they want to be on the podcast. So, I mean, it really just starts with you taking action, and not even taking big action, just taking small steps, right? If you're afraid to go for that person that you want, then start with someone a little bit smaller, right? Someone that's more attainable, or start with your circle of influence, right? Start with your friends if you want to reach out. And then slowly, build it up little bit by little bit, because it's those small actionable steps that really yield the great results.
Okay, so I want to touch on that because one of my friends, Russell Brunson, everybody knows him. He wrote the trilogy book series, and one thing he talks about is getting your Dream 100
Mm-hmm.
and reaching out to your Dream 100. And if you just get one person on that Dream 100, you're going to be able to get everybody around them. And
Mm-hmm.
I found what I started doing, if I had a certain person that I want to have come on, like say Mr. Ed Milet, I would actually interview everybody around him,
Mm-hmm.
and then he just becomes part of it. So talk to us a little bit about how you got your top 100 or top 10. How, and did you start reaching out to those Dream 100?
Yeah, I mean, I just literally made the list and just went for it. I didn't even know what I was doing, to be honest. As soon as I found an email address, I literally just sent a message, and I always led with my purpose, right? Because if I led with myself, it's like, well, they're gonna be like, well, who are you? Right?
Yeah.
But if I led with my purpose, then they get it, right? It's not about me, it's about serving others, it's about creating representation, it's about empowering our community, empowering women to do and be more. And so it was a lot easier for people to say yes, because it was more than, it had nothing to do with me, right? It had to do with the purpose. What was the purpose of the podcast?
So now, like I said before, you've been on Huffington, you've been on TV, radio, podcasts. So take me back to your first big time interview and how you felt the moments before being interviewed.
Oh, so last year, I got approached by a huge network in China. Um, and I was nervous as F. Super nervous because they have like over 100 million likes on Facebook. And then it was on a popular primetime show with an award winning host. And I was part of a panel talking about the Stop Asian Hate. And I was just so nervous because I was like, oh my God, so many people are going to be watching this. All eyes are on me. It was live, it wasn't pre recorded. It was a half an hour show. And I was like, but I wasn't the only one in the panel. But even that was just nerve wracking because I didn't know if what I would say, if it would make sense or if it was a right or wrong answer. At one point, I almost blanked out because I was just like my face was just like, oh no, what am I going to say? I totally didn't even hear what he said. And then he kind of gave like an example, and that kind of saved me because if not, I would have just been blanking out on national television in China. But I realized after that, I didn't die. I'm still standing. So I was like, if that's the worst that could happen, I can go back on TV again because now I know like I survived that. I'm good, right? I'm confident to go on again and just, you know, do it all over again. Sometimes we have to push through our fears in order to realize it's not as bad as we think. And then it builds our confidence, and then we can take on the next thing.
Okay, so now something, as you see, I'm writing stuff down. I'm always writing stuff down because I don't want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Yeah.
Now, I'm live in New Jersey. I'm about 10 minutes from Manhattan. And after 9/11, the crime on hate crime went up like 1,000%. And now, the last couple of years, since COVID started, we had the Asian hate crime skyrocketed again. So I know it's very near and dear to your heart. So if you'd like to talk about that for a few minutes, because I've had a few of my friends on, Filipino and also from China, and they talk to us about what Stop Asian Hate, but a lot of people don't even realize that it even exists anymore.
Yeah.
So if you don't
Yeah.
mind about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many misconceptions when it comes to racism against the Asian community. They think it only happened because of the pandemic when it's been happening for centuries. It's just because US and Canada never taught history of other cultures, right? Nobody knew we had a Chinese Exclusion Act, we had Japanese internment camps. In
Yeah.
Canada, Chinese people had to pay a head tax just to come into the country, and it was as much as the price of two houses. So imagine if we had to do that now. Like real estate in Toronto is not cheap. It's like the cheapest is probably like $1 million. So I'd have to pay $2 million just to enter the country, and I don't even
Wow.
know if they would accept me, right? So that's one thing. And even here in Canada, like yes, it's a very multicultural city, it's very diverse, but racism still happens. And the problem is people think racism doesn't happen. Like I had an aunt walking along downtown Toronto, and she got spat on, right, because of what's been going on. And the problem is people don't realize it's like PTSD for us too when we get attacked, right? Especially for our elderly because they've already gone through trauma migrating from Asia to the United States to Canada. And so, you know, for them that was the worst that could happen. But now our elderly are being attacked for no apparent reason other than the color of their skin. Their traumas are being triggered all over again, right? Nobody ever talks about the mental health issues that we go through, right? It's always about the person attacking them that's going through mental health issues, right? So it's like anyone can literally use that. Also, I know maybe it's easier for people to attack elderly because of a language barrier, right? English isn't their first language. So how are they going to go to the police and tell them that someone punched them or someone kicked them or someone hit them with a bat, right? We need interpreters, right? Um, Also, women are 2.5 times targeted more than men because of our negative stereotypes. We're seen as quiet, submissive, and obedient, so we become the easy target. I mean, New York has been a hotbed of,
Yeah.
hate crimes against women, right? We had one girl who literally got murdered in her own home. And I remember talking about that. And one man was like, well, why is she going out at night by herself or coming home at night by herself? But that shouldn't be the problem, right? The problem is, why did that guy follow her and decide to kill her for no apparent reason? I believe each and every person should feel safe in their own city. But yeah, as Asians, we're not. We always have to look at our shoulders to make sure nobody attacks us. I've spoken to Asian women in New York saying, before they could sleep through the subway, right? They could just sleep through, no one would bother them. Now it's a totally different story. They have to watch their every shoulder, their every move, because someone could literally attack them. We also have, women and elderly lining up for hours on end in New York just to get pepper sprayed to protect themselves. So, and that's just one city, right? Oakland has been also a hotbed for Asian hate crimes, even Koreatown in Los Angeles. I mean, it's just not all of them are reported too, right? The numbers you see those aren't real numbers, right? Because there's still so many that's unreported. There's still a lot that people are too afraid to share due to the fact that they don't want to get attacked again, or saving face, or not. And we're brought up to never share our traumas, and that's not good, because when we keep all that stuff in, it's gonna screw with us, right? Mentally, physically, all parts of it. So, um, it's like nobody ever cares about how we feel being attacked every single day. Like there was an article about a father and a daughter biking in Portland, I think, and some man asked him a question, didn't really pay too much attention, and then he decided to punch the father and the 5-year-old daughter, right? So now this 5-year-old daughter is going to be traumatized because a man just punched her for no apparent reason other than the color of their skin, right? Even during the pandemic, I was paranoid because, of course, we were the scapegoat for pandemic, right? Because of what happened. Um, I was afraid to cough in public because I didn't want people thinking I had the disease, right? Or, I was afraid people might come up to me and call me bat eater, right? Because that's what they were saying. And I don't even eat meat. And then not only me, I had to like think about my family, right? My parents, my sisters. My parents are old. I would never want anything like that to happen to them. So that's why every time I see an elderly being attacked, it hits close to home, because that would be my grandma, my mother, my aunts. And another thing too, I mean, it's not only Asian people that is getting attacked, right? A lot of people in the Latin community are being mistaken for Asian. So then they get attacked because of this pure ignorance, thinking they're Asian. Like there was an article last year about a 70-year-old Mexican woman who got beaten up at the bus because they thought she was Asian. So, I mean, there's so many things I could really bring up, and we'd be here for hours, because honestly, like, we don't get enough coverage. Like, unfortunately, if it wasn't for the shooting in Atlanta, we probably wouldn't get that as much coverage as we do now. For in the beginning, we were like crying to these news people to like talk about Stop Asian Hate. And when they did, it's like they didn't even have an Asian panel, right? They had like an all white panel. It's like, how are you going to talk about this
Yeah.
topic that 4 people can't relate to, right? I mean, there's over 24 million people that live in the Asians that live in the United States. You couldn't pick 4 out of the 24 million to talk about this important topic. And I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be rude or pointing out things, but like this happens all too often, right? Um, Even in Hollywood, our culture has been constantly whitewashed in movies. Till today, we still get whitewashed. And then we're told that our stories will not be able to relate because it's too specific. But like, how does that even make sense, right? You're taking our stories, replacing it with white characters, and then if you were to use authentic characters or authentic representation, it's too specific. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation.
But no, I like it. Something you said was talking about mental health, because I'm a big mental health advocate. Every year I have my own mental health summit called Today I Decide. And I find that if you're out on the street and you see somebody being loud, being boisterous, you're like, maybe they're struggling with some mental health issues. But if you see somebody with their head down, just walking quietly, you would never just think, maybe that person is struggling with mental health issues,
Yeah.
right?
Like there was one article where a guy decided to punch 7 Asian women. Like he went all over New York for 2 hours and targeted 7 Asian women to punch. And then he claims he has a mental health issue. That's like, if he really did, like, if he really did, he would just punch the first 7 people he saw and not go all over New York just to punch 7 Asian women,
Yeah.
right? And it's like it's so frustrating to see those things, right? Because it's like we take one step forward and then 2 steps back, And it's like it's just never ending, and we just constantly have to speak up and fight and just get the word out there to say, hey, like this is not right. We know we need to stop this. And I know racism happens for everyone, and that's why it's so important for everyone to just work together to eradicate this so we can live more peacefully and we can all just treat each other like we're all human beings instead of, you know, something else because of our the color of our skin. Like, when someone calls me a minority, like I don't even like the word minority because there's nothing minor about me, right?
Mhm.
Is it because of the color of my skin you just classify me as a minority? I'm still a person, right? I may not look like you, but I'm still a person, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that word needs to be taken out because we're all people, we're all equal. We all came to this country. We weren't the first settlers. We're all immigrants, right? Um, and we just have to learn to live peacefully so that we don't go through these problems, right? I mean, then if we were able to live peacefully, we wouldn't have all these crazy wars that's happening right now
Yeah.
too, right? It's all based on, to be honest, like male ego, right? And it's just yeah.
And like my dad is an immigrant. My dad came over from Italy, not speaking the language, literally came over on the boat.
Mhm.
And, so and when the Italians and the Irish first came over in the 40s and 50s, they were treated like crap also. So
Mhm.
we're, like you said, we're all immigrants. Nobody's from this country originally. So now I asked you before we got on, I said, if you can get 18 minutes for a TED talk, what would be your topic? And so we're going to give you a little time. You're going to have a Rick talk. So what
Okay.
gets you up and going? What gets you motivated? And how do you want to change the world?
Yeah, for sure. So I was actually talking to you, Richard, earlier about a speech that I did pitch for TEDx Talk, which was called "Positive Representation Leads to build Positive Representation Builds Confidence." Right, especially for someone who's never grew up with any kind of representation, that really lowered my confidence. I just felt like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't pretty enough because I didn't fit a certain way. I didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And I always thought I was just good for whatever people told me to, right? There was one point where I was working a job and I wanted to change jobs. And my coworker at the time was like, well, you don't need to change jobs because you already make more than enough as a woman. And sadly, I actually believed him and was in my job for 12 years because of it. So this is why having positive representation is so important. Having women in leadership roles, having our culture in different industries, because then we can see like, oh my God, I don't have to be a doctor. I could be a piano player and still make a career out of it. Or I can be a painter and still make a career out of it. I can be an actor or an actress, right? But if you want to be a doctor, that's great too, right? We're not saying you don't, like, you do what works for you, you do what makes you happy, right? And not being able to have that kind of representation, then we're seen by our negative stereotypes. Like, how many times are Asian women seen as, a sex object, as a yellow fever, or we're just seen as quiet, submissive, and obedient? That really hurts us, right? Because that's another reason why we're not advancing in leadership roles. We're always constantly seen by the negative stereotypes, even in Hollywood, right? How many times would they cast an Asian person as the sex object, or the geisha, or the delicate flower, right? Now we have, shows that I'm excited to watch, right? Like, there's a new show coming out called Partner Track, on Netflix, and it talks about an Asian American girl who is a lawyer, and it's about her fighting to have a seat at the table to become partner in her law firm, and it's like her against all her white male counterparts. And that's a very relatable story, especially for female lawyers, right? You're always trying to fight your way and you always have to work 100 times harder. So it was refreshing to see that, because not only is she a lead in a show, but she also portrays a lawyer, which is not typical in the entertainment industry, right? She was actually also the same actress who's in that show was also in a hit TV show called Teen Wolf. And then she found out that she made half the salary her white co-stars made, right? And so she walked away from it because she understood that she should be paid equally, right? And being able to walk away from that gave her the chance to be in a lead role, to be in a lead TV show. So that is huge, right? Because now you're like, well, if she's able to do it, so can I, right? And now we even had the first female owner, right? I think owner of a baseball team. For years, a lot of baseball teams rejected her. But if you saw her track record, I mean, if she was a man, she would definitely be been able to be signed on for anything. But she got rejected by like 5 teams. And it wasn't until like maybe a couple of years ago, like 2, 3 years ago, where she finally got that position, right? And so her being able to do that, she's able to open doors for other women out there to realize, you can also be a head coach, or you can be an owner, right? Like the possibilities are endless. Another great one is the kid from the Asian kid from the Goonies and Indiana Jones. He he has a phenomenal story too, right? Because of course he was in 2 major movies, but after that, um he couldn't get any more acting jobs because there wasn't a lot of roles casted for Asians, right? So he worked in the back, like behind the scenes for over 30 years. And then in 2018, he saw this movie called Crazy Rich Asians, had major FOMO, and decided to get back into acting. He called a friend who asked him to be his agent, and so the friend said yes. And then he got casted in the movie that came out this year called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Phenomenal movie. He got a lot of praise for it, and now he's getting more acting jobs, right? So being able to see himself in a movie like that, it gave him the confidence to reignite his career, and that is huge, right? And there's studies out there that show that when we have people from different cultures as the heroes, the protagonists, like the kids' confidence build up, right? Because kids spend an average about 6 hours a day on screen, right? And if you don't have that representation, it's going to bring their confidence down. There's lots of studies where like they did all these tests and they realized like these kids' confidence were down because they couldn't see themselves in the media that's been portrayed. So this is why positive representation is so important. It needs to dismantle the things that we're seen as and create better representation, stronger representation. And it also is like we're also responsible for that, right? I always believe that if you want the change, it really has to start with yourself, right? And then also now that we're in this era of like promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's a lot of companies, they say they're allies, but they don't really do anything that really promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Um, yes, we see a diverse workforce maybe on the lower level, but when you look at the hierarchy of a company, like the top people are still the same, 5 Caucasian guys, right? And it's like, how is that diverse when the top people is still the same and the bottom and the bottom is still, all diverse? So there's just so many things that we have to fix to create this kind of representation. I mean, even whitewashing of characters in Hollywood still happens to today. So oh, I don't know if you're still there. Okay. But yeah, I don't know if that was 18 minutes or not, but that would be what my speech would be about, just really the importance of positive representation and how that can help us.
Now, like I said, I grew up in New York or New Jersey, New York area, big basketball guy. But it wasn't until Yao Ming and Jeremy Lin broke the ceiling
Mm-hmm.
that you started seeing, more Asian players. So, but sometimes there has to be that one
Yeah.
that breaks out, and the one that they can't be afraid. And I think that's one thing that you talk about is lifting your voice, becoming the change.
Mm-hmm.
So, talk to us about your podcast, your book. Talk about everything that you have going on because you're definitely changing the game as far as I see.
Yeah, I mean, so I still have the podcast. I'm going to be on my 8th season soon. So I can't believe it's been that long already. Um, we have our book. I have a book called Asian Women Who Boss Up, which highlights the stories of 18 Asian women who are able to forge their own path, overcome obstacles, and thrive. And even that was very important for me because I just didn't see any books that highlight that many Asian women on the front cover, or let alone one Asian woman on a front cover. And even there's a report last year that the representation of Asian American authors in the US is only 4%. 4%. So imagine how much lower it is for Asian women, right? Because I'm sure with the ratio, it's more men over women. So we decided to create that book, launch it out. We didn't realize when we launched it, it was going to be at the height of Stop Asian Hate. And this is part of a book series that's been created from the pandemic. So since then, we just launched our 8th book since the pandemic. And we were able to create a second edition of the Asian women, highlighting Asian women, called Asian Women Trailblazers Who Boss Up. So super excited that we've been able to create 2 books highlighting Asian women because people don't realize, the Asian American community is the fastest growing community in the US, but it's still the most invisible. And that's why creating this type of representation is so needed, because there's a lot of stories out there that aren't being told, right? And I feel like if you're not sharing your story, you're being selfish. You're doing a disservice to your community, right? Because your story could empower someone. Your story could help someone realize their potential. I mean, even in the book, we have women um, who've been diagnosed with breast cancer and sued by the FTC at the same time, right? And talks about how she's able to overcome that. Yeah, it's crazy. And it just shows how strong women are, right? We have other ones where, another person talks about having multiple personality disorder. And that's not always easy to talk about, especially when in your culture, mental health is considered a taboo. So her being able to open up in a book really helps people realize it's okay not to be okay. It's okay if you're going through something, especially during the pandemic. Even worse for us because we had the pandemic plus the anti-Asian hate, right? That could really affect our mental health. Um, so so yeah, and then next year I'll be launching my own book, talking about the topics of Asian women leadership, which I'm super excited about because, to be honest, I didn't know this was going to happen. Like it just all came into place, but that wouldn't have happened if I didn't go out there and just took action, reached out to people. um, Even though if I wasn't too sure what I was doing, I just went ahead and did it. And I think as women, we tend to overthink everything, and that's why we resist so much. But honestly, if we just take action, like we can just achieve so much. And as women, we're so capable. It's just how we perceive ourselves is what holds us back.
But one thing I have to say, is a lot of people, not just women, but men also, they'll look at a market. Like for me, here in New Jersey, right, a couple towns over, it's almost 100% Korean.
Hmm.
And then one part of town is almost 100% Filipino. So a lot of people would think, well, that market, it's untapped, but nobody's ever went there. Nobody's ever got into it. So I'm not going to be the first. So
Hmm.
talk about, being the first, because I'm sure, like you said, if Asian people, only 4% write books, there's got to be a whole lot of people that are going to be interested in reading that book. So, but you
Yeah.
have to put yourself out there and start doing it. Action.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know it's not easy, especially if you're doing this by yourself. That's why having support is so important, right? Like having a tribe, a community of women who are also taking action in their own journeys, right? Because when you see other people doing that, then it gives you the courage to do it as well. Because you're like, well, I'm not the only one doing this. There's other people doing the same thing that I'm doing. Like a great example was, video is something that I never liked doing. Being able to do my first YouTube video, it took me 2 hours to do a 2-minute video. And I was just like scared as ever, mumbling, stuttering, sweaty palms, sweaty pits, everything. But then I was in a women's group where I saw other women who went through the same fears as I did, putting their first video. So being able to see that, I was able to realize, like, oh, if they could do it, then so can I. If they are able to push through it and they feel the same that I was feeling, then I'm able to push through it as well. Still really like bad, but at least I was getting better as I kept doing it. And now it's like, the fear is gone because I've been able to do it because I didn't have to do it alone. There was a group of other women who are doing the same thing. So sometimes, most of the time, having a support system is essential, right? Or even listening to positive audio, right? um social media has given us this misconception of what entrepreneurship should look like. They think it's fancy cars, fancy vacations. I mean, of course, yeah, that's great. That's a great benefit, but people don't realize you still have to work long hours, right? I mean, yes, you have your own schedule, but you could be working 24 hours in a day. You got to figure everything out yourself, right? If you're starting out, you won't have stable income, right? uh you know
Yeah.
you got to learn specific skills like marketing or sales, or how you're going to bring in the bacon, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting out on your own. So I wish people were more honest about that versus like showing the good stuff on Instagram. I mean, they're nice to look at, but like then there's this whole misconception of entrepreneurship. It's like, well, I can't do what he do. Like he already made it, right? We always hear all these overnight success. People don't realize these people have been, at it for years and years and years and years. It's just everyone hears the glory, but never hears the story.
I love it. And, and they say that an entrepreneur is somebody that's willing to work 100 hours for themselves so they don't have to work 40 hours for somebody else. So
Yeah.
I love that. So what is the name of your podcast again,
It's
and where
called
do we find it?
Yeah, it's called The Tao of Self Confidence. You can check it out on my website at the Tao of Self Confidence.com, or it's on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, all the major directories. And there's over 800 interviews that you can binge listen. They're super short, they're about 15 minutes or less. So it's a great boost of confidence for the day.
All right. So now, like I said, what is coming up in your life in the next 18 months?
Um, well, I'm right now in the process of writing the book to have it for next year. We also are going to be having some in-person conference that we're planning, so that's still all in the planning stages. And just checking, just always finding different ways to get my message across, right? To get visibility. So one thing I've done is I've applied to be a speaker at South by Southwest. So I'm in the voting stages of becoming a panel picker. So if you happen to see a link, vote for me. I would love it. My panel idea is called Asian Women Leadership and Why It Matters, because an article from USA Today mentioned that Asian women are getting left behind in CEO roles. And why is that, right? Why are we being left behind in leadership roles? And so I want people to realize we can be leaders as well.
And if you guys ever get Disruption Magazine, check out her article. Truly amazing. I loved it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to put that out there. Since I knew you were coming on, I had to start creeping. So I watched everything that you've done. I've pretty much read everything. So
oh, wow.
I just want, and she has an amazing IG. So make sure you go to her IG. Make sure you follow her. She's putting out some amazing content. So Sheena, I just want to say thank you. I'm truly humbled and grateful, and hopefully we can build a generational relationship where we can support each other.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me here. It's been such a blast.
It's been fun, guys. Thank you so much, our sponsors, Soldier Girl Coffee. Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Tammy. And guys, I always sign off with these 3 words. Today I decide are the 3 most important words in the English language. You don't have to be the same person when you go to bed tonight as the same person that woke up. So today you can decide whether you want to be a worker or whether you want to be a lady boss. So definitely thank you, guys. Check out Sheena. She's doing amazing things. And remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. I love you. Sheena, have an amazing day.
You too.